Welcome in to Flag for Discussion, episode 8 for Monday, June 2nd. We're in June now. My name is Farbod Merkazi. He's Jace Hatfield, as always. Jace, before we get going with anything, I've got a bit of a bone to pick with you.
Oh,
There's a lot that I've enjoyed about this podcast, but we're not experienced podcasters, so we're trying to figure things out on the fly as we go. This is a bad picture if you're watching on YouTube, but we've had 7 episodes. In 3 or 4 of them, I've worn the same quarter zip, and you haven't called me out about it. It's just the
I
same
think I'm
white
happy with
quarter.
the hoodie here.
It's just the same white quarter zip. I think I noticed this last week after our show, and I was like, "Is that just my show attire?" We're not at a point as a podcast enough to really call to have sponsors of shirts and stuff. Like Josh Pate, he wears his white, but I'm just wearing that quarter
He's
zip.
getting paid for it.
I mean, who knows? Also, the side note, Harper, come here. We have my dog who's going to be making some cameos on the show, and she's a little,
It's a producer.
yeah, she's spinning around in circles right now. So today, episode 8 of Flag for Discussion, we're talking about who has the most to prove in the SEC, in the Big 12. The program report will be back. What do you think of the coaching performance, the recruiting hopes of a Billy Napier, or not Billy Napier, Mike Norvell, Elaine Kiffin? And then we're going to talk about College Football 26. We're going to talk about Mike Leach and the College Football Hall of Fame. So we got a lot going on. Before we get into anything, please take a moment, subscribe to us on YouTube, Flagged for Discussion. Obviously, we're the most active there, and Twitter at F4 Discussion. TikToks, we're trying to figure it out. It's going to become a running joke, but I think we will get there, and the moment we get there, it's going to be glorious. So we will get there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to us. Give us that ding. I don't know if that's what podcasters say. Give us a 5-star rating. I checked Spotify the other day. We have a decent amount of 5-star ratings for the side of the show, so I'm pretty happy about
And
that.
that means people are listening to what, like, you have to listen to like 2 or 3
Yeah.
episodes before you can give a rating. Good for all of you. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who's taken a part so far. We're going to get into everything right now. Starting out, Jace, I don't want to just limit this to players and coaches. We're going to talk about the SEC. Who has the most to prove, do you think? SEC player or coach coming into 2025 this season?
Ooh, I kind of went back and forth between the same school, the quarterback, and the coach. That would be
I think you're
so.
muted.
Billy Napier.
You cut out real quick.
Uh-oh.
No, you're back.
Uh-oh. All right. So I was kind of debating between DJ Lag, both at Florida, so you could team as my most this year. I think they've so under Billy Napier, they started 6-7. They went 5-7 to second. Then year 3, they went 8-5. So they haven't taken that jump that I think Florida wanted to game playoffs, SEC championships. But they've shown to be a little bit better. 8-5 isn't a lot to, if you're Billy Napier, to really say, hey, look, I've proven myself. We can do this. So I think fans are probably holding out on him. Like, this is the year. This is also the year they had a lot of continuity this year. They returned a lot of big names in the O-line. Jake Slaughter, their center, kind of regarded was the best center in the country last year, decided to return, and that kind of kicked off a slew of offensive linemen returning for them. So I think you've got this 5-star prototype NFL, potential top 10 draft pick quarterback. You've got one of the best O-lines in the country. You can only use the excuse, hey, our schedule is so difficult so many times before it's like, all right, it's going to be difficult every year you play in the SEC. So I'm going to go with Billy Napier. I think this is kind of his do or die season. I think this is a prove it season. If he can win those 10 plus games, he proved all of us, all the haters, and maybe I shouldn't say us, but the haters wrong and the supporters correct. I'm pretty 50-50 on him. We shall see what he does. But I also want to touch on their schedule a little bit because I think it does impact what's some tough away games. They play LSU, at Miami, at Texas A&M, at Ole Miss, and then at Kentucky as well. So he's going to have a chance. That's 5 difficult away games. If he has a say, hey, look, I'm proving myself. I have proven. But if you go 2-3, 1-4, that could be really tough. 0-5, obviously, there's not even a for proving himself. So that's my final answer with Billy Napier.
No, I think Billy Napier is the overall pick for most people. There's no one who's been fired the most amount of times without being fired in the country than Billy Napier in the last year. When we're talking about Florida itself, we can talk about it all that we want off the field. Man, they have Billy Napier and his team have really elevated everything within the program. They have better facilities. They have more infrastructure. They have all the people and coaches and recruiting personnel to be in Alabama. At some point, you got to do it, though, on the field. And,
yeah, 100%.
And for me, I think a lot of people are high on Florida right now because of DJ Lagway, the former five-star quarterback. I'm just looking at that team. I'm like, DJ was good and he showed flashes last year, and he wasn't planned on being the starter, so the offense wasn't built around him. Nothing was necessarily set up for him to succeed, but he showed flashes. But at the same time, he struggled. So it's not the fact that like it's a guarantee. Like a lot of people think is with Arch. I don't, but a lot of people think is with Arch Manning that he's going to come in and be a superstar from day one. If he is, then Florida's probably going to win a lot more games than people think. But like you said, Billy Napier at Florida has gone 6-7, 5-7, 8-5. That's just not good enough.
Yeah, no, not good enough for a program that wants to be, like you said, that Alabama conversation. Alabama doesn't do that.
I have a question for you on Billy Napier. So the Dan Mullen era was going all right at Florida. I think they were competing and they had better records. I haven't done the research, and we haven't done the research, so this is just off the bat. His last year they struggled, and he made a comment that he basically came out saying recruiting is not as important as the guys on the field. Basically just saying like recruiting is important, sure, but my guys here are more important. Kirby Smart, like the next week or so, came out and said, I'm Kirby Smart, I'm a good coach, but I'm a better coach when I have the better players and I recruit. And so he basically said recruiting your ass off is the most important. If you were a Florida fan today, would you have preferred them not letting go of Dan Mullen, or do you think eventually Billy Napier will be that coach that Florida fans wanted? It's just been a much slower start to begin.
It's a good question. I was pretty off on Dan Mullen by the end of the time at Florida. He kind of took over a 10-win program, if I remember correctly, and kind of just took it like every year they kept losing 1 or 2 more games. It was almost like, I know we make the comments like winning isn't linear. Sometimes losing is. And they kind of had that linear losing where every year it was like less players drafted, less big time commits, winning less games. And I think it's really easy for a Dan Mullen, a guy like on his way out, to say, oh, recruiting doesn't really matter. Yeah, man, 'cause you're going to get fired after the season. But I don't necessarily think that means Billy Napier was the right answer. That coaching carousel was interesting because Billy Napier was one of the bigger names at that time. Like a Dan Lanning wasn't, but I think if you ask any college football fan, would you rather have Billy Napier or Dan Lanning? They'd all tell you Dan Lanning. But in the moment, that might not have been the case. So I don't think they should have held on to Dan Mullen. I think getting rid of him was the right call. But I'm not sure Billy Napier. Like I said, he's my prove it guy, so I'll give him this year to prove it. But as of right now, I'm leaning Billy Napier might not have been the answer, though.
That's the question is, I think if he doesn't prove it in your eyes, he's gone at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
this is his year for me.
Yeah, he needs to. If you look at the schedule, they have fairly easy games at at home, but they also have Texas. Is UT Texas or Tennessee that you wrote down? They have
that one is Texas.
They have Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida State at home. So those aren't like gimme home games. Obviously, the Swamp's hard to play in, but the fact that they have a tough schedule this year. I think last year might have been the toughest schedule not that only that they've had, but that anyone's had ever. Last year's schedule was
Yeah.
ridiculous. But regardless of that, you're right. I'm looking at Dan Mullen's last 4 years. I mean, 4 years at Florida. He went 10-3, 11-2, then 8-4, and 5-6. The 8-4 was
Okay.
the 8-4 was in the COVID year, but 5-6 the year after. So yeah, they were slipping, and I think where a lot of detractors of Billy Napier come in are the people who don't want to acknowledge the full circle. The Florida, I don't know everything about it, but what I do know is Florida had some administrative issues throughout the last couple of years, including during Billy Napier's time. One of the reasons a lot of people, a lot of Florida alum feel like Billy wasn't fired last year is they didn't have a president. They didn't have a school president. And they felt weird hiring a new head coach without a president there. So there's just a lot of intricacies of Florida that just are unstable right now. So I don't think you can blame everything on Billy Napier, but you can also definitely blame just the lack of preparedness that some of the last couple of years have shown.
Yep.
The lack of competitiveness sometimes. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, by the end of the year last year, oh, they're pretty good. What happened? Why couldn't you have shown this at the beginning? So I agree with you. Billy Napier is definitely one of the coaches with most to prove. I think if you're talking about other coaches, I would lean into maybe a Brent Venables at Oklahoma or a Hugh Freeze at Auburn.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer has a lot to prove too.
I was going to say, I think a lot of Bama fans would throw Kalen DeBoer's name in this hat.
Brian Kelly, I think, has a lot to prove. So I couldn't decide coaching-wise on who has the most to prove. So I'm going to go with a player. I have Jackson Arnold,
I love that answer.
Former Oklahoma Sooner, former 5-star. He was the number 4 quarterback in the country, or number 4 recruit in the country, number 1 quarterback, I believe, in his cycle. And he came in, didn't play his first year. Dylan Gabriel was at Oklahoma. Essentially, Dylan Gabriel, even though he had a year left, he almost was shipped out. And you don't want to say that. He almost was like, hey, if you want to leave, we're not going to be heartbroken. We have Jackson Arnold here. And it was almost like a agreement with Oklahoma that we need you gone, Dylan. Not because we don't love you, not because you're not great, but because we can't lose the guy that's coming after you. So if all the importance that they place on Jackson Arnold, now he goes into his redshirt freshman year, sophomore year, technically, at Oklahoma. 62.6% completion percentage, 12 touchdowns, 3 picks. I think the numbers make it sound a lot better than it actually was.
He was kind of feasting on some poor teams at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, so he ended up getting benched, and their offensive coordinator got fired. Oklahoma had 5 wide receivers out for a lot of his games that he was the quarterback for. So you almost don't want to blame him for everything there. But lo and behold, all the craziness that happened, he's at Auburn now. Auburn's also going through their own troubles. That's why I mentioned Hugh Freeze as their quarterback, as the coach that might have the most to prove. Realistically, Auburn brought in him and Ashton Daniels from Stanford. Last year, they brought in a couple of good receivers, but mostly a really good freshman recruiting class, including Cam Coleman. And a lot of Auburn fans said, why are you sticking with Peyton Thorne? Why don't you go out and pay $1 million or $800,000, whatever, to get the best transfer veteran quarterback you can? And for what it's worth, I thought Hugh Freeze made the right decision because I don't think the roster was in a place where he could justify that spending to his boosters and to his collectives. While Peyton Thorne was a disaster, I think. And the Robbie Ashford era wasn't great earlier than that, too. For me, Jackson Arnold has the most to prove because he has his coach's job security on the line, too. And he not only was the number 1 quarterback in his class, that means I think let me restart. He was a number 1 quarterback in his class. He was so highly touted that they pushed off a Heisman finalist to go to another Power 5 program in Dylan Gabriel. He was basically given the starting spot, start entering last year. So many hopes for the future. He was the Elite 11 MVP, if I remember correctly. Everyone just basically thought the world of him. Going into last year, there were some issues or some rumors that were like, Jackson Arnold hasn't been very accurate. He hasn't been very sharp in practice, in training camp, and OTAs. And I think while some of it was the OC's fault, it just felt like Oklahoma was never on the same page, quarterback or wide receiver wise. To me, he has to have the most to prove. I don't know where you are with Jackson.
No, I agree with you. I think similar to DJ Lagway too, he's in a scenario this year at Auburn where they've kind of built a solid team around him. Like you said, they have Cam Coleman. We were talking just before the show. They brought in transfer from Georgia Tech, Eric Singleton Jr., who's a very good wide receiver there. One of the more highly touted transfer wide receivers. The running back room, you bring two guys that were 4-star recruits. They're back again this year, a senior and a junior. So, a little bit older, a little more experience. And then defensively, the projected starting defensive 11 are all returning players as well. So I'm not claiming Auburn's going to have one of the best rosters in the country or anything, but Jackson Arnold is definitely going to be in a better situation this year than I think he was last year, just given the amount of injuries the Oklahoma wide receivers faced and kind of the situation that he was put in, just kind of getting thrown into a storm that was like led by the expectations were really high, following Dylan Gabriel there. So I think he's given a really good roster. That's something he can succeed with. Like you said, I think him and Hugh Freeze are both probably feeling the fire a little bit. And so, yeah, I think he's a great candidate for someone to prove. I believe in him, and I actually kind of really am pulling for him. I hope it turns around for him. Also, I've always been a big Eric Singleton fan. I actually wanted him to commit to either Oregon or Michigan State in the offseason, but so I'll be rooting for him as well. This will be a fun team to follow.
Eric Singleton's one of those guys too that's like he's not going to be begging for touches or catches. He's not going to be taking balls away downfield from Cam Coleman. So Cam Coleman will be able to cook. Singleton
Eric Singleton's a good possession guy.
Possession guy, slot guy. That they're not going to be taking balls away from each other. So Jackson Arnold should have the receiver help that he needs. The other aspect of it, I think people don't want to talk about. Not that people don't want to talk about this, but the other aspect of it is Hugh Freeze is a really good offensive coach. And going into last year, he revoked the play calling duties from his OC. And I think there was a celebration around the podcast space, around people who cover college football, basically saying, I'm sure that guy's good at play calling, but Hugh Freeze is he's a head coach because of his play calling. And his entering year one at Auburn, he gave it up because he thought he needed to be the CEO head coach rather than continuing to do what he does best. I don't think all of that panned out last year because of who he had at quarterback. The roster was still growing. But if he can get Jackson Arnold in the right place, I mentioned the OC issues at Oklahoma. I think Joel Klatt did a really good podcast on this during the season. But without getting too nitty-gritty about what was going on wrong with the Oklahoma offense, I would basically he explained it as everything. Like no one was speaking the right language. Receivers were cutting the wrong way. Arnold was keeping it when he should have handed it off to the running back. He was handing it off when he should have. He had a lane to take it himself. There was no one that was speaking the right language, and unfortunately, Oklahoma had no one to throw the ball to. And at that point, it was, I argue part of the reason they benched him was they were protecting him. And it wasn't just because he was bad. It was because there was so much that was going wrong with the offense that they needed to, not break him down mentally, psyche-wise. But all that said, he has the most to prove for me because I think he has it in him. And I think he's in a spot where he can prove it at Auburn with the offensive coach, with a really good offensive coach, with one of the best wide receivers in the country that no one's talked about in Cam Coleman, and Eric Singleton Jr. now with a decent roster. I wouldn't say the best. Their over-under right now, without looking at the schedule, is 7.5.
That's
Where,
pretty good for them. For a
yeah,
team that probably hasn't won 8 games in 3, 4, maybe even more years.
yeah. I mean, looking at this, they got Baylor on the road, then Ball State, South Alabama. I think you could argue, worst case, that's 2-1.
Yeah, worst case. They should be 3-0.
Yeah. So then they have at Oklahoma, at A&M versus Georgia, which is brutal. Um,
Yeah.
so even if
At
you're
Oklahoma will be fun for him.
really,
I'm sure there's no
really,
bad blood with him either, because like you said, I think they protected him a little bit, but that'll be interesting to see how that goes.
yeah, there probably is a little bad blood. Not like, oh, I hate you guys, but like, I'm bummed that this didn't work out. I'm bummed that everything that you sold me coming out of high school was wrong. And like not necessarily bashing Oklahoma, but nothing went the way they probably explained to him. And
Yeah, there's no way they pitched, hey man, you're not gonna play your first year, and then you're gonna be pretty bad your second year due to our inability to put together a roster.
exactly,
I doubt
and
that was the pitch.
our inability to recruit offensive line, or at least prioritize offensive line early on.
Yeah.
So even if through Oklahoma, A&M, Georgia, now they're 3-3. Then they got Mizzou, Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Mercer. Who lets them? Is that Mercer?
That's the classic SEC like week 11, week 12 throwaway. It is the most
That's
that is this
ridiculous.
is a tangent I'm going to go on. That the SEC scheduling those non-conference bums late in the year is the most unfair advantage. Like that's never talked about. People are like, "Oh, whatever, man. You just play your bad teams at the beginning." The mental and physical break that game provides you as a team, it's a free bye week. And when everyone else is dogfighting at the end of the season, you're just trying to keep guys healthy. You're trying to keep guys back. Like everyone's injured and banged up, but playing their asses off. You get a free game where you like most of these teams could just play all their backups. You get backups some experience. You get third string some experience, and you get to rest your starters. That is such a. I'm sorry for the
Let's
tangent,
no.
but I hate
I
that
actually
game. So I'm glad you called it out.
I'm gonna finish this Jackson Arnold take, but I want to continue that tangent real quick after. And then they have Alabama. So through, if you're telling me worst case, they're 3-3 through Georgia. Then they got Mizzou, Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Mercer. Maybe they go 4-1 in those. That's 7-4. Alabama. That's the difference. I would argue they could go 5-0 in those middle spans. So all of a sudden, you're looking at 8-4, potentially 9-3, but worst case, probably 4-8 years. Like if Jackson Arnold isn't who we think he should be. Let's talk about your tangent, and we got a lot to get to. We might scrap the Big 12 from today. There's without doing a ton of research on this yet. The talk of this last week has been not only the SEC, not only what Greg Sankey, the commissioner, said last week, but there's a chance the Big Ten and the SEC would want to enter like a scheduling agreement. And if they do so, the Big Ten would want the SEC to enter expand to a 9-game conference schedule. One of the biggest complaints around the SEC in general has been exactly what you said. They were entering the 9-game. That they play 8 conference games. They have University, if nobody has a chance against these SEC programs, State University, going up against you in like week 8, week 9. It's a free bye week, like you said. Where are you with that? I personally don't think. I've done a little research, but not a ton. The Big Ten probably won't go for it without the SEC agreeing to go to the 9-game conference schedule, because the Big Ten's like, if you guys just want to play us and then play Mercer week 11, then you're just trying to say, oh, we're going to get more playoff spots than you in Big Ten. Like, it doesn't make sense for anybody. But that is, I guess I don't know what my question would be, but it's just like, that is the debate that's going on in the last 7 days, 6 days about the SEC versus the Big Ten. There's a whole lot of crap that Greg Sankey said.
Yeah, I feel like I do want it to be even. Like I want all of the major conferences to play the same amount of conference games. And I don't mind if, you play your first non-con week 0 and someone's first one's week 1 or something. That's fine. But I do think all of your non-con games should be between week 0 and week 5. and you should play all 3 or 4. Everyone should be on the same. Let's say everyone goes to a 9 game. All 3 of those should happen in the first 5 weeks of the season. I don't because it really isn't fair to get that free bye week 11. So I remember like last year, like Alabama or Georgia playing like Chattanooga, like week 12, week 13. All these other big programs are gearing up to play like ranked games on the road. You're like I said, you're fighting for your life in some of these games, and then they're just going on the road to play. Or Chattanooga's coming in, and I'm going to play my third string quarterback and give them a chance. It is an unfair advantage, and I think it should be pretty straightforward. Let's move to a 9 game conference schedule with how big conferences are getting. I think you need to play a little bit more. Then those 3 non-cons should be at least forced into the front of the season. At least they're tune-up games. I'm fine with that. I would love an SEC versus Big Ten challenge type, like the way they do in college basketball. That would be amazing. Also, I think it would be such a great. I hope the committee puts a lot of weight on those games because it wouldn't surprise me, like we've seen in the past. The SEC will lose games like that. Like early in the year, they'll lose to other random conferences. Like they'll lose to a Cal, they'll lose to a UCLA, they'll lose to a Nebraska. But somehow, some way, it just never seems to punish them. Like late in the year, when it's between those 2 teams, they'll pick the SEC. I feel like maybe the Big Ten SEC challenge type thing would be the official like icing on the cake of, all right, like, Oregon just beat Alabama and they're both 10-2 at the end of the season. We're picking the Ducks. Like I think it should go that way. But I don't know if the SEC will fall for it. Because I think the SEC, everyone kind of loops them in with the Big Ten, but I still think the SEC is a step above the Big Ten in terms of power and control over everything.
I would give it. I think if you're telling me, like, if you're one of the folks that's out there saying the SEC is not the best conference in college football and they're overhyped, I think you're crazy. But at the same time, I do think there are as good, if maybe just a little worse, conferences around college football. And the fact of the matter is the SEC is just deeper. And for me, I think I'm going to give a shout out to Andy and Ari, their show, because they were talking about this all last week. It was really interesting for me. I think if you think about week 6, say that is SEC Big Ten week. And I don't know how you would decide it, but maybe it's the number 1 seed from the year before and each conference plays each other week 6. The number 2 seed plays each other week, so then everyone plays with about a team as a similar level. So it's not Oregon going up against Arkansas or Georgia Purdue. Yeah. It would be week 6. It's going to be Ohio State, Texas, or Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Texas, USC, LSU. Like you enter some marquee matchups there. And I think a lot of people probably would want to talk about how that's not needed. And one of the reasons that I said earlier, the Big Ten probably wouldn't want to go into a 9-game wouldn't want to go into the scheduling agreement with the SEC without a 9-game conference. Is simply because the Big Ten will still play 9 conference games in between around that. The SEC will play 4, so just the chance of them losing 1 extra game is that much lower. They're going to play 8, so the chance of them losing that much games is that much lower. So it boosts the SEC's chances at a playoff spot, or at more playoff spots. For me, if the SEC decides to go to the 9-game conference schedule, the Big Ten keeps theirs, and they have some sort of scheduling agreement. That's great. I think one of the things that's hard about college football right now is, like, the Raiders were bad last year in the NFL. They're going to get a last place schedule. We're not going to talk a lot about NFL. I would say they have one of the best odds, like win totals right now on any sports book for if you take the over, just because they have a last place schedule and they're actually competent. But the NFL has scheduling rules, and for better for worse, who's going to have the easier schedule. You know who's going to have the harder schedule, but it'll all even out. In college football, Oklahoma's schedule is night and day different from Texas' schedule. It's night and day different from Florida's schedule. One team's going to feel like, man, we're getting beat up every week. Another team's like, this is the hardest thing the SEC can provide me, and then it also provides you a chance. I think last year it was Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, Ohio State in that standings. You're telling me if we put Indiana up against Alabama, week 6, week 7, we wouldn't have found out a lot about both teams?
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have had that conversation going into the college football playoff of Indiana's not it. Like, a lot of people kept saying, like, Indiana's going to shock people. And then we found out, they didn't play anyone.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin did a lot of talking. He would have had a chance to play Ohio State. Could have proven himself there, too. I think it's one of those things where it's not necessary. It's a lot of fun, and it would be helpful. I think the SEC, I don't want to say chickening out because I think that's like putting them in a bad light, but I don't think they'll go for it because they have everything right now is geared towards the SEC. Like, there's no real reason for them to give somebody else a chance to like catch up to them because they don't really have, if they win all these games and they dominate this challenge, then like they're already on top, so it doesn't really help them. But imagine if the Big Ten every single year starts putting out more wins than the SEC in that tournament or in that challenge. The SEC has a lot to lose. They don't have anything to gain. So I'm not sure they'll go for it, but for the fun of the sport, I really hope they do.
Exactly. This might be a topic next week because I think it's a really good, just where the SEC and the Big Ten are right now.
Yeah.
I think I want to get into our Big 12 most approves. So you had Billy Napier and I had Jackson Arnold in the SEC. Well, we can make this quicker if you want, but let's get into Big 12. Who has the most approved in the conference of anyone can win?
I like that. I'll keep it brief here. I was stuck with the coach. I went with Kyle Whittingham, the head coach of Utah. Had a really strong stretch from like 2015 to like 2022. Most years winning double-digit games, competing for Pac-12 championships, winning a couple of Pac-12 championships, going to Rose Bowls. Phenomenal football team, producing a lot of NFL talent in that span as well. Final year in the Pac-12 2 years ago, they go 8-5, and first year in the Big 12, they go 5-7. Kyle Whittingham has kind of lost a little bit of momentum, it feels like, in terms of being that really cool, underrated coach. I think people are kind of realize how good he has been. I think this is the year he needs to prove himself in the Big 12, especially. Like you said, anyone can win it. You don't really want to lose a step when everyone feels like they're on the same playing field. If this is a year you finish bottom 4, you're really going to lose a step in recruiting and just transfer portal hype in general. But if you finish in the top 4, I think you really gain a step over everybody else. So it's a big season in the Big 12. I think it's, like you said, it's up for grabs. Kyle Whittingham, I think you've proven yourself in the past. You need to prove yourself again. And they have a relatively favorable schedule. I'm not going to call it easy. They do play a couple solid teams, but it's very winnable. None of these games, I'm looking at the 12 here. You have BYU, Kansas State, Arizona State, Texas Tech. Those are kind of your iffy games, but even then, none of those games are Georgia, Texas, Ohio State. Like, there's no reason you shouldn't win 8 games this year. And while you're giving your answer for the Big 12, I'm going to find out what their over-under win total is because now I'm curious.
Yeah, I have to. I'm not going to promise it, but I think it's 7.5 but I would definitely find that and let us know. 2 weeks ago, I don't know how much of our show while you were in Spain you listened to, but I had Kyle Whittingham, as one of the most interesting coaches in college football for me. And we'll bring that segment back. I think for me, what I said was, it's not that he's interesting because he is, like, because Utah's going to be this juggernaut necessarily, or Utah's going to hell. It's because the Cam Rising era is over. And I think realistically, I have a lot of respect for the guy, and I know how good of a coach he is, and I know how every aspect of that team the last 3-4 years, correct me if I'm wrong, was ready to win championships. The only one that wasn't was Cam Rising's health. And they relied on Isaac Wilson. They had another kid who started a quarterback, moved to running back. They could run the ball. They have one of the best offensive linemen in the country, Spencer Fano. Their defense is always top notch. They had some injury issues last year, and Isaac Wilson just wasn't the kid who they hoped he would be. But at the same time, I think Cam Rising was a great quarterback. He led them to a lot of great things. It was time for him to go maybe 2 years ago. And I'm going to say that quietly because a lot of
Yeah,
people
I
are
think
going
it
to
screwed over Kyle Whittingham.
realistically realistically it's possible that like they just had to hold on to him and they didn't want to be that program that's like, Cam, we love you, thank you for all that you did, but it's time for us to move on, like Oklahoma did with Dylan Gabriel. Like I said, I'm going to say this quietly. It was time for Cam Rising to move on 2 years ago. But I have a ton of respect for Kyle. He has a lot to prove. So it's 6.5 wins. Oh, no, never mind. I was looking at the
I'm seeing 7.5
Okay,
for him.
great.
Yeah,
So
he's been a great coach before. The prove it for me is, do you still have it? Do you still have the juice you used to?
right.
And I think that's kind of what he can do this year. Try to do.
And I'll keep this quick. The really interesting part for me is, I mentioned it 2 weeks ago too. Devin Dampier coming in from New Mexico. They hired the New Mexico OC. Dampier was all right through the air, but he was, for a quarterback, I don't have his stats in front of me, but his like advanced stats. Broken tackles. I think if he had the number of snaps, he was on track to breaking Ashton Genty's number of broken tackles last year if he just took the amount of snaps running the ball, as many snaps running the ball as Ashton Genty did last year.
That's crazy for a quarterback.
I get it that he played at a lower level. I get it he was at New Mexico. But the guy was electric. And I'm really excited to see what it could look like. And that, I think for me, you're right. He's probably a prove-it coach, but I think there's a chance we look up week 5 and we're suddenly back like mind mold back to 2019, be like, oh, that looks right. Utah's 5-0. They're killing teams. They're tough at the line of scrimmage. Their defense is great. They can run the ball, and their quarterback is doing what he needs to do to win, not making mistakes, making the passes when he needs to, and moving forward from there. So you said 7.5?
Yes, sir. That's what the official line is.
I would take the over on Utah. I think
I would too. Look at the schedule. I would.
Like, just looking at their schedule right now, West Virginia, UCLA, Baylor, Wyoming, Cal Poly, Colorado.
Give them Cincy as 6 wins.
Like, that we could get to 7 based off of just real quick, and then they got to beat BYU, Texas Tech, Kansas State, ASU, at least 2 of those.
West Virginia, yeah,
to get that over. So I agree with you. I like the most approved from Kyle, but I only say what I've said because I think he's going to prove it, and I'm pretty high on them as I am on ASU and other teams. My answer for the Big 12. What do we say? Play the hits. Deion Sanders. I can't believe it's taken us 8 episodes to talk about Deion on this show.
I think I brought him up in the CFB villains, and I think that was the only episode 1, the only time we've talked about him.
And then the other time I brought him up, we brought him up during the Shador draft fiascos. But we haven't talked about Deion the coach. And
yeah, this is our first chance.
I think a lot of people hate him, rightfully so. I'm not part of that group. There are some things he does that I'm like, I don't know if that's what you need to do as a college football coach. But at the same time, everything he's told you has been he's there for coaching young men. He's uplifting young men and developing young men. And I don't think he's proven to us that he's not there for that. Now, people don't like the attention, how boisterous he is, how loud he is, some of the things he said. It's personal comments and the videos and whatnot. People don't like that. I get it. I don't like the fact that they changed the Colorado touchdown celebration song from their marching song,
school fight song,
from their fight song to Shador's songs. I don't love that. But I say all of that to say, one of the things that a lot of people had about Deion was Travis and Shador. He wasn't recruiting like a guy who was going to be there for the long haul or who was going to try to actually build Colorado. He was recruiting like a guy who was trying to maximize Shador, Shiloh, and his other basically son, Travis Hunter, their time in college. Get them the most exposure, the most branding, the most touches, get them everything they can almost to use Colorado. And a lot of people thought that. But then he's here now. So I think those people were wrong at the same time too. So I haven't even given you why I think he has the most to prove. In general, I think a lot of people don't like Shador or don't like Deion, and rightfully so. There are a lot of things that he's done to make people dislike him. But at the same time, I think for the most part, he's been pretty good for the sport and fun to follow. Whether you hate him or you love him, he's been fun to follow. So I have him as the most to prove in this conference because Travis and Shador are gone. Say what you want. It's pretty nice when your kid's a good quarterback, and he wants to jumpstart your development. And then he had to go recruit Travis, sure, but it's pretty nice when you have Travis Hunter on the roster too, who can be a difference maker wide receiver wise on the field offensively, and then be a difference maker defensively. So those guys are gone. They brought in Caden Salter from Liberty. Who had a down year last year, but I don't know how much of that. I don't know where that came from. And then they got the 4-star, I believe, true freshman flip from USC and Juju Lewis to come in at quarterback. I think he has a lot to prove because it's not as much about the Colorado media machine anymore. It's about, all right, how are we building this thing? Because your kids are gone. And your over-under win totals right now is 6.5. How I get it when you lose a quarterback and a difference maker like Travis, you're expected to take a step back, and winning is not linear. But at the same time, your fans aren't going to look back in 3 years if you go 3-9 the next 3 years and be happy about it. You just signed a massive contract extension, a 6-year deal, I think. You got Houston, TCU, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Kansas State on the road. Not a cakewalk, but not particularly hard
tough.
either. Georgia Tech's tough. Delaware, BYU, Wyoming, and Iowa State at home. 6.5 win total. I probably would take the under, but that's why I think he needs to prove it.
Yeah, I also think it's a good prove it answer too, because you're more Deion neutral than me. I'm more on the Deion hate side. I'm not like a full blown Deion hater, but I've not been a big fan of his over the last couple of years. And for me, he's a prove it because yes, he stayed this year, and his kid's not there anymore. Travis Hunter's not there. But just because he stayed for 1 year doesn't prove to me that, like, my comments of I still think he was only in this for his kids and for himself. I want if he stays at Colorado for 3-4 years and actually gives it his all, like recruits his ass off, takes his program to new heights, and actually elevates it. I will be the first person to put my hand up and say, yeah, I was wrong. He got me. But if they go a lousy 4-8 and his recruiting is lousy and he just leaves it in a dumpster fire and steps away to go coach the Cowboys or something, I think we'd be proven completely correct. So this is a big year. I think if he gives it his full blown effort, they have a good season, he's recruiting his ass off, and he seems like he's all in. I think he would also prove to a lot of people who might be like against Deion Sanders when we all said, "Hey, I think you're just in it for your kids." I think he'd prove us wrong by doing that. So I do think it's a prove it year. Yes, just winning on the football field, but also I think if you want to prove a lot of your haters wrong, this is kind of the year to do it.
I think you're right. I think, look, I'm not trying to be a Deion apologist, and I know I'm not. Like, there's a lot of things that I'm just like, that's corny, that's stupid. Like, I don't like that. But at the same time, I work in entertainment. Most of what he does is like entertaining, and it's good for the sport. And there are some things that he does. I'm like, dude, that's just not enough. That's not what you need to be doing to coach this team. But you're right. We'll find out. But that's why he's a prove it guy. We'll see if he is recruiting a little bit better than what he has so far. I think he has gotten some good players, but Colorado fans would, even if they gave him truth serum, would say one of Deion's superpowers in college versus the NFL, if he were to go coach the Cowboys, is that Deion can go into any living room in college and be Coach Prime, be cool. And he has one of those gravitational pulls the way he can communicate, connect with the kid is unlike most coaches, other than I would argue like Nick Saban, and that's like no, like Kirby Smart has
It's
a
a
lot.
different level too.
Yeah, Kirby Smart has
It's
a
a
lot
different
of
version.
pull because he's won national championships and everyone knows he's smart. I don't think he's Coach Prime. It's like in level
No,
of pull. And a lot
most
of
of them go to
times,
Georgia because of Kirby's swag.
yeah,
You know, they go
I,
because he goes like this, and there's rings.
exactly. And I hate to like say it like this, but when you're 16, 17, 18, you're very impressionable.
Hmm.
When Coach Prime comes up to you and wants to recruit you and talks about all the things that he can do for you and you can do for him and how what Colorado can make him better, you can be convinced. And so, like a lot of Colorado fans are probably like, we're not recruiting still at where we need to be. You're right, Jace. I think if we look up 2 or 3 years from now, he's had 2 or 3 mediocre years, and all of a sudden the reports come out. Yeah, time to move on for Deion. Love Colorado, but I'm gonna go try out the NFL, or I'm gonna go just hang out in Cleveland with Shador. Like there's some aspects of it that's just like we'll just have to see. But I think signing a 6-year, $60 million deal is somewhat commitment enough from him, and the fact that he's here, we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
All right. So those are our prove it coaches alongside a tangent about the SEC 8 game schedule. Let's move into a couple quick notes, and then we got the program report version 2 today. Let's talk about Thursday. College football playoff came through with a ruling that I know I was
College Football Hall of Fame.
College Football Hall of Fame. Thank you. Sorry. I was looking forward to this ruling. I didn't know if it would ever happen. I don't know about you when it did, but last year Mike Leach passed away suddenly, and 2 years ago. It was very recent.
Yeah.
Leach went 158-107 all time as a head coach. He had a 59.6 win percentage. So he did that at Texas Tech, Washington State, and Mississippi State. He obviously, we all know how great of a offensive mind and mastermind he was, how much he's not only impacted the sport, how much he's impacted the players that have gone on to the NFL, but also how many coaches he's put into head coaching positions because they've coached under him. As like Lincoln Riley was there.
Yeah.
What's his name? The former Texas Tech coach, Arizona Cardinals coach. Now he's in Washington.
Cliff Kingsbury.
Cliff Kingsbury is there. Like he's molded a lot of brilliant minds, and up until last year, up until Wednesday, he wasn't eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame because his win percentage was 59.6, and the College Football Hall of Fame requires a 60% win percentage. So, but prior to this, a head coach needs to be active for 10 seasons, coach at least 100 games, and have a 600 win percentage. So Mike Leach had a 59.6. Thursday, College Football Playoff tried to write the College Football Hall of Fame. Geez, I said that twice now. They tried to right the ship. They moved him down to. They moved the requirement down to 59.5. Just give me a quick take on it. I don't know what you think about it. Is this like a fix or a loophole? Because I've been reading both.
Yeah. First note, I definitely think Mike Leach deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. His win percentage and his accolades aren't going to do justice if you're new to the sport and you're like, what, really, this guy? But like you said, he was kind of the first guy to implement like a true air raid offense. And so like a lot of, college football went that direction. The NFL went that direction, which is why you see the the Cliff Kingsburys and Lincoln Rileys, plus many more I don't have pulled up or anything. But he kind of invented that style of offense and ran it for a long time. First guy to do it, and that bled all over college football and then the NFL. He's also produced a lot of NFL caliber quarterbacks that came out of Washington State, which, it's a school that a lot of people don't think about on the map. And so I think he's done a lot for the sport in terms of a lot of NFL talents come out of there for being a school that doesn't do much in the grand scheme of college football. I'm really happy he made it. He deserved to be in the Hall of Fame.
No, he's not in the Hall of Fame yet. He's just eligible to be inducted.
Oh, he's eligible.
Yeah.
I think he should be. He's eligible to be inducted. And my vanilla take is going to be, it's a good idea, and I like the humanity side of doing this. I think it's moral. I think it's ethical. I think it was the right thing to do, especially with how he passed. It was rather unexpected in the moment. My fear that I have is the same thing that happens. I've got it all listed here. The same thing that happened with NIL. It happened with the transfer portal. It happened with conference realignment. It's happening with the college football playoff. As soon as someone tweaks one good thing we have, someone will come in with a greedy mind and will ruin it for the benefit of money, their pockets, business, whatever it might be. It's happened with every single step of college football so far the last couple of years. I don't want us to take this Mike Leach situation and then just twist it into how can we start, finagling rules and getting coaches in and find that in the coaching contracts. I don't want to go there. I hope it doesn't go there, but I wouldn't be surprised. So that's the only thing I'm a little nervous about.
I agree with that. I think my first take was, is that easy? Like you can just make the decision to lower which is scary. And kind of what you said is like, we start finagling with things, eventually the sport's not going to look like what we love. And this is like an argument that's been made about the transfer portal is one of the bad parts of transfer portals. A lot of teams are supposedly, I don't see them as much like this, but a lot of fans do, which is the more important part, a lot of casual fans, as mercenaries. Because a lot of teams are built up by some high school guys, but mostly transfers as their starting 11. And that every change you make like that, the transfer portal right now is wearing away at the fabric of fandom, your attachment to your team. So every small, like you're right, this is a small change. This is a major change, but it's a symbol that changes can be made for the better like this, but also give the wrong people the keys, and it could be made for greed, for financial reasons, and continue to wear away the fabric that we have connection-wise with the sport, with our team, with our fans, with the players. For me, just a quick take on this, the Hall of Fame in any sport should be taken seriously. So I don't think criteria necessarily need to be lowered. With that said, you cannot write the story of college football without Mike Leach. And that's how I see any Hall of Fame. Can you write the story? I don't want to go into a baseball debate with you right now. We can do that.
Good debate. I think we completely agree on it.
But let's talk about, but let's bring up Barry Bonds. Can you tell the story of baseball without Barry Bonds in there? Now, you can talk about, for me, I believe he doesn't necessarily need to be like, oh, here's this great hitter, but you got to put a little asterisk, like, here's the issues that he had. Here, he did steroids. Here's part of the reason that he made the Hall of Fame is because he wasn't honest with the player that he was on the field. So but I still don't think you can tell the story of baseball without Barry Bonds. Similarly, but in a much better light, you can't tell the story of college football without Mike Leach. And Mike Leach was such a major player throughout the sport for all the players that he coached, for all the coaches that he coached with, for all the people who stole his schemes, for all the people who stole his, he was a major force. And he was probably, I don't know where you would rank him, probably number one all time in just sound bites from coaches. One of the best.
Oh, yeah. Him and Mike Gundy.
Yeah.
Just 1A, 1B.
Just one of the best consistent, randomly breaks out into a conversation about war mascots or candy corn. So, all that said, I don't think you can tell the story about college football without Mike Leach. So, good for him. Good for college football for getting this right. This one can be quick. College football 26. Video games coming out this summer. We have 25. We're not sponsored by this game or EA, but we are avid gamers and avid college football gamers. Also,
EA.
as Jace's face tells you, EA, we're here. We would we would love a copy, advanced copy. We'll promote you everywhere. So, Jace, College Football 26 right now cover athletes are for the normal edition are going to be Ryan Williams, wide receiver Alabama, Jeremiah Smith, wide receiver Ohio State. I'm not a massive cover guy, but there are sometimes I see some covers of video games. I'm like, that guy sucks. Like that guy doesn't need to be on it.
Yeah.
And then there's sometimes I'm like, who cares? Where are you? What do you think about the cover? Is there anyone else that deserves it? Are you a
No,
one person
I
cover
like
guy,
it.
or do you like last year's where it was like 50 people on it?
I like mixing it up, and I thought this tandem made sense. Like these are the two same recruiting class. They were like 1 and 2 wide receivers in their recruiting class. They were both outstanding as freshmen. They're both probably going to be top 5 picks next year in the draft. I like having them both. I also think like Alabama, Ohio State, cool teams, historic teams. Yeah, you kind of Alabama, hopefully coming back on the rise. You have defending national champion. I had a good buddy of mine who's an Ohio State fan made the comment. He's like, it should have been Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith, which I can't really argue against that. It is two best players probably in college football and also the defending national champions. I'm also happy to see we didn't do like a Donovan Edwards thing. Even when obviously we didn't know Donovan Edwards would be as bad as he was last year, but even when he was on the cover, everyone's like, what is this guy doing here? Like he's a fine running back, but he wasn't anything special, especially because it looked like Michigan was they were in the middle of the cheating scandal stuff and they were not out looking to be great this this past year, but the year after the cover came out. So I'm happy we just stuck to 2 guys. We know they're going to be good. We know they are good, and we know their teams are going to be good. So I'm good with that. And then one tidbit I wanted to make, the deluxe version, the crazy cover with like everyone, schools. I love that Washington wasn't in. I thought that was hilarious. So
So where's Washington memes from last year, but even more so. Yeah, I don't have a beef with it. People who want to say they have a beef with who's on the cover of a video game, I think have way too much time on their hands. With that said, they got the two guys that needed to be on it, and like you said, we don't have a Donovan Edwards thing because worst case, unless Alabama or Ohio State are just absolutely terrible at quarterback, you expect both of these guys to be very good this year. And
yeah, it would be unbelievable if they weren't. Like something crazy, like catastrophic would have to happen.
Or tragic
Knock on wood,
injury.
I shouldn't say that.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
The only other thing that just made me think of is you mentioned they were in the same recruiting class. Cam Coleman was in that recruiting class. It just goes to show like situation matters.
Nick Marsh was in that class.
Like if you could tell me if, let's say Cam Coleman went to Georgia last year, and you're telling me that this year it wouldn't be those 3 on the cover? Like, because they're all in the same class, they're all the best receivers in the country. That just made me think of that. But I don't have any issues with the cover. I just wanted to get your take on that.
It's a fun cover. I like it.
I'm just ready for the game to come out, to be more than anything.
Me too.
Alrighty, Jace, clear our voices. Let's talk about version 2 of the program report. And for those who weren't here last week or who weren't watching last week, every week we're going to go over 3 coaches. We're going to go over 4 categories: coaching performance, recruiting vibes, program hope / trajectory, and a hot seat meter. Jason and I are going to rank them 1 through 10. And then we're going to take the average of the rankings, and we're building out a database for each of these. I don't have the database pulled up. But eventually, by the end of the season, we're going to have basically a organically generated ranking system of all of college football's coaches. Last week, we did Dan Lanning, Mike Elko, and Justin Wilcox. This week, Jace, why don't you kick us off with Mike Norvell? Where do you have his coaching performance?
Mike Norvell. I got his coaching performance at a 6.2. This was a really hard one to give. Just started off really hot at Florida State. After Jimbo, the Willie Taggart years were really bad at Florida State. Jimbo Fisher had him at great heights. Towards the end of Jimbo Fisher's career, they're on the downslope. Willie Taggart really took him down. Mike Norvell had him to double-digit seasons like his second year, and then that 13-1 season, and then to just go like 2-10, 1-11 last year, and just be terrible. It was hard to judge because up until that 2-10 year, you'd have given him like a 9.0. But after that, I was like, where do I even put him? I went with a 6.2. I think his climb was really impressive, and I do believe in that a lot. But that fall off was just, I mean, I had to punish the fall off that he had. Also, I think like bringing Florida State back was very impressive. But I also docked a little points because I think they were in the ACC, and they're like one of the big bad dogs. They got the most, some of the more money in the ACC. I think it's a conference that if you're going to turn a program over, it's a lot easier to do it in the ACC with a school with a lot of money than it is to go into like a Mississippi State in the SEC and do it. So for that, a 6.2 is where I landed.
Great. I have him a little higher. I have him at a 7.1. Also, Jace, if you don't mind, while we're doing this, could you fill in the Google sheet so we have the ranking at the end of it?
Oh, absolutely.
So
good call.
Because I a little behind the door look into our podcast. I didn't fill any of these out, so Jace is kind of at a disadvantage. So I have him at a 7.1. I agree with you that you had to dock him. I think you would argue that his coaching performance would be at a 9.0 or an 8.9 if last year was at least like a 7-6 year. The problem is he started out his tenure at Florida State after just, like you said, just terrible performances by Willie Taggart and Jimbo Fisher just up and left. He went 2-6, 4-4, 5-3. So he started showing the fact that growth and winning can be linear. Then they exploded 10-3, 13-1 with Jordan Travis, a quarterback. They tried to repeat that last year, bring in some transfer portal stars, recruit decently well from high school, and try to coach a lot of. In general, I think his coaching performance has been good, but there's a lot left to be desired. I think he's a great coach. I think Florida State fans would tell you, I wish we recruited better because last year wouldn't have been as bad if we prioritized high school recruiting a little bit more over transfer portal recruiting. One of the reasons they tanked so hard last year was because once the transfer portal recruiting kids started suffering or going down, the high school recruiting kids, weren't ready enough to take the reins. So I think he's been good, but I don't think he's been great. He's a great coach. It's pretty much a prove it year for him, but I have him at a 7.1. Recruiting vibes, Jace. I know you're doing two things at once.
No, we're good. It was good timing here. Bang, we're in. All right, so for my recruiting vibes, I got them at an 8.2. Even despite their terrible season last year, they're still recruiting in the top 20s in both high school recruiting and transfer portal. Transfer portal tends to be in the top 10 for them. High school recruiting has still gone well. Also, part of recruiting vibes for me is just they have a lot of NIL and they do a pretty good job with it. So I think that helps them, like in a good way, that helps them out a little bit. And then Florida is also I've said this with Texas A&M, Florida is such a hotbed for talent that Florida State, regardless of how they do in a regular season, I think they're always going to be a good recruiting team. There's just so much talent to be had there. I think they've capitalized on it pretty well in the past. And to still put together a top 20 recruiting class after having the massively disappointing year they had last year, I think that's impressive. I think that shows a lot of, inelasticity of what they kind of do as a recruiting program. So for that, I'm going 8.2. I'm not going higher than that because I don't think they recruit at an elite level quite yet. But I do like where they're at recruiting-wise.
Unlike the first one, I'm lower than you on this one. I have them at a 7.4. I think they recruited fine. I think in terms of filling out the needs that they've needed to, they've done a good job. But I'm not going to discount what I said in the last episode, in the last bit. Florida State fans and a lot of fans around the country will believe that if they just were a little better at high school recruiting, prioritize high school recruiting a little bit more, that last year wouldn't have been as much of a debacle as it was. They put so many chips into the transfer portal basket, where in 2023 it ended up working great. They went 13-1. we all know what happened that year. Jordan Travis gets hurt. They were bound to be in the college football playoff. They got snubbed out of it. Got blown out by Georgia in the bowl game after getting snubbed out of the playoff. There's a lot of chaos that happened there, but that's an example of the transfer portal working well. Now, if you're talking about the transfer portal working poorly, it's last year. Brought in DJU and a lot of other kids to fill in the roles of kids who had graduated and moved on from the 13-1 teams. I don't think recruiting is where Florida State fans wanted it to be, and they think that they could have avoided a lot of last year if recruiting was better. Program hope trajectory. Where do you if you were a Florida State fan, where would your hope level be 1 to 10?
Well, I almost think a Florida State fan would say less than what I'm going to say. I put him at a 5.5. Like for me, like 5 flat was kind of my initial thought, but then I was like, they recruit pretty well, and like I said, with the talent in Florida and being in the ACC, I think you can turn around a program quicker there. So I bumped it up to a 5.5. But I don't have a. They're in a bad spot. The ACC is in a feels like a sinking ship. They're not as dominant as I think they hoped they would be, like where Clemson or Miami is at right now. 5.5. They got enough money in the name that they could turn around at any point, but it doesn't look great at the moment.
I have them at a 5 flat. I think the hope is there, but I think if you're talking about the most anxious programs, fan bases in the country, Florida State's that. They just signed Norvell to a pretty massive extension 2 years ago, or last offseason. And this current offseason, he had to give some of that money, not had to, but he offered to give some of that money back to the boosters to help out with potential revenue sharing. When your coach has to give some of his salary back, it's not a good sign. And
no,
I'm going to repeat it. He's a great head coach. He's a great football mind. And I think if he got fired tomorrow, he would be hired the next day. But Florida State, in terms of program hope, they've just been through so much crap from Jimbo to thinking they had it with Willie Taggart to that tanking to a slow growth with Norvell, and then all of a sudden booming 13-1, 10-3, 13-1, and then just one of the biggest falls you could ever imagine. I have them at a 5 flat. I think they this year will tell them if they think they're going to be really great or the hope is dot. Hot seat meter. 4th category. Remember, we're ranking this in reverse for those at home. If we're not going to, the number 1 is the hottest seat. Number 10 is the coldest seat. We're doing this because that's what makes sense in the calculations rather than. Yeah. So, where would you have him hot seat meter wise?
I've got him at a 5 flat. I'll keep it short here. If he has a great year, he's gonna be safe. If he has a bad year, I think it's gonna be dangerously close.
Yeah, I have him at 3.4. I think when you're talking about if he has a bad year, it's gonna be dangerously close. I think that's what it would jump down to. But in general, I think same thing as I said in the last topic. Florida State fans are antsy. I'm not saying their administration is, but it's gotten to a point where if they go 6 and 7, do they just want a new voice? And mind you, I don't think he would get fired because he has that massive contract, so it would be a pretty big buyout. But there's a lot to prove for him this year, heading into 2025. Yep. All right, so that makes Mike Norvell's score a whopping
598.
598. Let's move. At the end of all of these, I'll give our current program report standings. Moves to the second coach, Lane Kiffin, our beloved Lane Kiffin, down in Oxford, I believe, Mississippi.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about Lane Kiffin. Coaching performance, 1 to 10. Where do you have him?
I have him an 8 flat. We're very similar on pretty much everything here, and there's not a whole much conversation. I feel like his career has been pretty straightforward. Ole Miss was always a program for quite a long time. He took them to a new heights. Now they're kind of one of the more contending teams in the country. He still doesn't have those like signature wins and big playoff wins and appearances for me to go much more than an 8 flat. But he's been a great coach. He does a good job recruiting. He does a good job coaching. He knows offense really well. He's producing a lot of NFL talent. Players seem to like playing for him. 8 flat. He's a good coach.
All you need to know is in the 3 years before Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss went 6-6, 5-7, 4-8. In the 5 years with him, they've gone 5-5, 10-3, 8-5, 11-2, 10-3. Have they reached the heights that necessarily they dreamed of? No, but I don't want to say that they have no shot at national titles or consistent national titles, but Ole Miss is at the upper echelon of one of those window programs that we talk about in college football. They can compete every year, but they will always have that 1 year every 3 to 4 years that they're like, that's going to be our year to win a natty. Last year was the year.
Yep.
So, yes, you can say they underperformed. But in general, Lane Kiffin's been an excellent head coach. I have him at a 8.3 for coaching performance. Recruiting vibes were the same at 8. They've been good recruiting. I think he's done a good job, like bringing all of his boosters and collectives together to explain to them his vision. Basically, create an NFL free agency mold of like, I'm going to recruit and develop high school here, but it's not going to be my main priority. I'm also going to buy and shop where I need to. But he's done so far. He's done that with the right guys, and
Yeah.
he's developed the guys as they've come in too. So I don't know what else you have to say about recruiting, but I think he's been a good
Yeah.
recruiter,
No,
not great.
that's it. Yep.
Program Hope, go for it.
8. I kept with my 8 flat here. He feels like an 8 flat. If it just when you're talking
He's
about
pretty
it,
much an 8 flat kind of coach. Yeah.
he is. Yeah, 8 flat. Like I think he's doing the most that you can with an Ole Miss team. SEC is hard. I don't think he'll ever take Ole Miss to being like an Alabama Nick Saban dynasty. And I think you probably know that it's hard to get kids to go there versus the other there's not a lot of big talent in Mississippi that there is in Georgia and Florida and Texas. And, I think they're going to be the second pick to a lot of those main schools. He's a great coach. He does good things. I don't go higher than an 8 flat because I don't think that Ole Miss is ever going to be that big time dynasty that Nick Saban might have created or that some people might think. But I also think he's a great coach. And I do think, like you said, they have windows that come pretty often. I think the transfer portal model, I think, caps you. I think if you're a really big transfer portal team, you're never going to be the best team in the country. But I think it gives you a really good floor. It's a way to know what you're getting yourself into. And for that, it feels like an 8 flat for me again.
Program Hope, I have him a 7.5. I think that's just a understanding of like everything you said. It's the consequences of winning, the pitfalls of winning for a head coach or a program, and being successful is that your fan base and the national media no longer sees you as that 4-8, 5-5, 6-7 team. They see you at that 10-3, 11-2 ready to grow from team, which is unfair. Like the reality with an average head coach, probably somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit higher. Their ceiling probably is a national championship, but their ceiling will never be year over year. They're ready to compete for a national championship this year, next year, the year after that. They're going to constantly need to rebuild, reload. And the only reason I have them at 7.5 program Hope is I expect them to be competitive and good every year. Lane's going to get them going. They're going to win the games they need to. Last year, they won that massive game against Georgia. Not Georgia. Yeah. Anyways, there's just some games that like I feel like they need to pass an echelon that I'm not going to say that Ole Miss can until they do it. There's a tier that they need to pass to make program Hopes 8, 9, or to make them a full-blown reload program that it's hard to predict unless they do it. So
That's fair.
Hot seat meter, we're both pretty much similar. You have him at a 9. I have him at an 8.5. Unless he goes 1-11, starts dog cussing every coach, every player. I don't expect him to get fired. Do you?
No, I don't. I like I said, I'm at 9. I think he's safe, barring anything crazy.
Yeah, that's Lane Kiffin's one of the better coaches in the country. He has his warts for sure, and you almost wonder. That's why every year his name is in coaching, like the coaching carousel. People think like, man, if he's done that at Ole Miss, imagine what he can do at a program with more resources and a better and a program that is expected to win national titles. How much better could he be? And he's similar to Mike Norvell. I think if he got fired tomorrow, which he's not going to, he would be hired the next day. Wrapping up, that brings Lane Kiffin's score to 8.16, so definitely higher than Mike Norvell. Brian Kelly, LSU Tigers, coaching performance. Go for it, Jace.
7.3. This is a hard one to rank. I think in my opinion, he has underperformed with what LSU should be. I think LSU should be national perennial contenders, one of the best teams in the country. Everybody should fear them. They have the resources, they have the talent. They've been a top dog for a long time now. He's still winning double-digit games, so it's hard to really knock him that much. But a 7.3, just because I do think he's underperforming, and I do think to be an 8.0 or higher, you need to be at or above. Actually, you need to be well above your expectations. Winning 10 games is nothing to knock and act like it's no big deal. But when it's at LSU, it isn't as impressive as it is at Ole Miss. So for that, I'm giving him a 7.3.
Yeah, I have him at a 6.8, but I might bump that up. I'm looking at their last 20 years of records right now, and 2010 through 2012, 11-2, 13-1, 10-3, but 2014 to 27, a lot of 8-5s, 9-3s, 8-4s. So it's not like they've been a juggernaut. Obviously, 2018 and 2019, 10-3 in the national champion in 2019. But before he was brought on, they went 5-5 and 6-7. So I'm just saying a lot of records just to say maybe I'm a little personally jaded by Brian Kelly because I don't love a lot of what he's done since he's been at LSU. I feel like whenever he loses, it's not his fault. He blames his team, players, coaches, refs instead of him. I think he has done a phenomenal job coaching, but at the same time, you take that with a grain of salt of he wasted Jaden Daniels' Heisman year. LSU, if they had a shred of defense, if they were top 50 defensively, they probably would have won the national title that year. Jaden Daniels was on another level. That offense, Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And for me, that's where I'm kind of just demoting him a little bit. That's where I'm punishing him a little bit to 6.8.
I like the demotion.
I get it. He's gone 10-4, 10-3, 9-4. I get it. He's been a good coach, but by LSU standards, every head coach that they've had since the Nick Saban days has won a national title. We're going to get into program hope. I don't know where we are in terms of hope for that to happen with this head coach. So I just have him at a 6.8. Recruiting vibes, we have them pretty high. I don't know if you have a ton to say. They're recruiting very well.
Yeah, keep it short and sweet. They recruit really well. They are consistently top 10, usually top 5. They're a powerhouse in the recruiting world.
Yeah. So I have them at a 9.2. You had them 9.4. The only thing I would argue is outside of just recruiting well, they started losing their grip last class on some Louisiana kids, and that when LSU's at its best, they have a strong core of the best Louisiana kids. So we'll see how that goes. And then Brian Kelly, not the biggest proponent of NIL and transfer portal. There were multiple guys last year. I remember Oregon got Derek Harmon from the portal, and he had an interview shortly after, and he was talking about well, Derek Harmon was there. This defensive lineman was there. You guys need that. Why don't you go get it? And I think he's just not scared of it, but he's hesitant to use it, and that's where you might give you some point of concern about recruiting. Program hope and trajectory. We're also similar here. Let's expand on that.
Yeah, I'm at an 8.8. You're at an 8.5. The 8.8 reasoning mainly, we're probably on the same page here. It's LSU. You've got a lot of resources. You've got a lot of talent. You kind of have a monopoly on one of the most talented high school football states in the country. you're a top dog. You got big boosters and donors. I think you're always going to be one of the top NIL teams. You recruit really well. This would be higher if Brian Kelly wasn't the head coach. This 8.8 comes from the fact that I think the world I think Brian Kelly will open their eyes to, okay, shit, the grass is not always greener. We need to figure something out like now, and something, it's a big step. I think they have the resources and the draw to make a really good hire. And that's where that 8.8 hope comes from. They're a powerhouse. They're one of those programs, as we've seen them do it multiple times. They can just turn it on like that, like a snap of the fingers. They're going 13-0, setting crazy records. So 8.8 just due to the program, not due to Brian Kelly.
Yeah, I'll go 8.5. Same stat what I said earlier. I don't think either your 8.8 or my 8.5 is any different. Same stat I said earlier. Every coach they've had since Nick Saban has won a national title.
It's crazy.
And they have talent on the roster. They had a dramatic defensive deficiency 2 years ago. Got a little bit better last year. They brought in the Texas defensive coordinator. Got better. They have all the tools that they need right now, offensively and defensively, to be successful. Let's see if they are. Like you said, though, it's an 8. I think if you're basing it off just the program hopes are probably 9.5. You just trust LSU to be there at the end eventually. But because of Brian Kelly, I have him at 8.5, docked him that, and you probably docked him that to 8.8 because of that.
Yeah.
Hot seat meter. We're also similar.
This was an interesting one.
Yeah, very interesting.
I have him at 7-0. He has not been nearly bad enough to just fire because, you stink. But he also isn't in that. You would think any guy winning double digits every year, recruiting as well as he has, would be at 9 or a 10. A lot of LSU fans, rightfully so, aren't in love with Brian Kelly. They don't love what he's been doing. I think he's kind of come across as a little cringy at times, a little crass. I think even though they're still signing the number one transfer portal class, his anti-portal mindset, I think, has rubbed some people the wrong way. I think he's one of those guys that's everyone's kind of waiting for him to slip up. I think people want him gone. As soon as he has that really bad year, that really ridiculous comment or something like that, I think this is going to shoot to a 1 or a 2. But for now, if you're winning the way he's winning and recruiting, I think they're going to keep him at a 7.0. But like I said, I think everyone's waiting for that one moment, and that one moment happens, I think he's out the door. So 7-0, but could be lower than that maybe.
I think one thing people don't want to consider is he took over for, yes, a coach who won a national title, but it was just mess. Apparently the reports that were coming out was there was no organizational structure within LSU towards the last couple of years of Ed O. There was no, the program wasn't in the best spot chemistry-wise, coaching staff-wise. There was just a lot of things going on behind the scenes that weren't in a good spot. So I think LSU boosters and administrators would 100% take somewhat underperforming on the field over some of the crap that they had to deal with the last 2 years of Ed O. So I have him at 6.4, which is closer to the hot seat than your 7. But I mainly have that as I have, this, I'm not the biggest Brian Kelly guy. I don't love the fact that he throws his kids and coaches under the bus without taking a lot of the fault himself. People want to talk about his the accent thing that happened when he first got hired. Who cares? It's more, what are your actions since? And they've been recruiting well, underperforming. Recruiting well, lose to USC, he slams the table. I don't know how this keeps happening. I'm like, dude, you're part of the reason why that keeps happening. There's no way in the world you should have lost to USC last year. All due respect to USC, LSU should have beaten them. So I don't think he's fired in the next 2 or 3 years, but he is a bad year or another down year away from, is he really the guy kind of conversations. So that's kind of where I'm at with him. What is our final score of Brian Kelly? We have him at a 7.93. So going into through 2 weeks of the program report, Dan Lanning still holds the lead at 9.48 in our program report. Next up is Mike Elko at an 8.2. Shortly, close behind him, Lane Kiffin, 8.16. Ryan Kelly, 7.93. Mike Norvell, 5.98. And Justin Wilcox, 3.86. Like we've said throughout last week and this week, we want to do this with your favorite head coach, all the coaches around the country. We're going to talk about 3 of them every show, if not more. Please let us know if you love them, if you like our takes, if you dislike our takes, if you think we're brutally wrong or brutally right. By the end of the summer, we're going to have a ranking system of the best programs and coaches in the country, and this is just the start of that. Real quick, if you also want a copy of our rankings or our ranking system, a Google Sheet system, Jace has it. Just DM our Twitter account, or if you have our phone numbers, feel free to text us, and we'll get you a copy of that. We've had a couple people already ask, so it's been kind of cool talking about that throughout the week. It's just been 1 week.
Yep.
One final segment. I know you got to get out of here, Jace. One game to wrap it up. It's another season opener. We went through the Aer Lingus college football playoff matchup in Ireland last week with Iowa State, Kansas State. Let's go over another season opener. August 30th, Alabama, 11.5-point favorites at Florida State. August 30th, 3:30 Eastern Time on ABC. What you got?
In Tallahassee. I like that. If right now I'm rolling with the Crimson Tide. 11.5 in Tallahassee sounds like a lot of points. Florida State could turn things around this year. I actually do think that they will be a much better team this year than they were last year. But they're also, as we mentioned earlier, really reliant on the transfer portal. And this year is going to be no different, especially, after having the bad season like that, they had insane roster turnover. It's hard to gather yourself with a massively turned over roster week 1, especially when you're going to play an Alabama team who has great roster continuity this year. They retain most of the defense and the guys that had left, mainly at the linebacker position. You replace with 5-star guys from the class before, and offensively you bring back Ryan Williams. I think Florida State's Frankenstein defensive back room is going to really struggle against a Ryan Williams, Kalen DeBoer system week 1. I think that's one of those games that Florida State is in for a long game. It's also hard to predict. Like we were talking right before the show, this could be like a 30-18, and Florida State kicks a useless field goal at the end, and it's whatever. But I also see a world where Alabama just, Kalen DeBoer looking for kind of a statement win, because you have to remember he's pretty hungry after things that were said about him last year. This could be one of those games they come out and win 40-3, the same way Georgia kicked Oregon's ass 38-3. Dan Lanning's first game as a head coach there. It felt like 2 even programs on paper. Maybe people were probably like, "Oh yeah, Georgia's definitely better," but I don't think people thought 38-3 better. This kind of feels like that similar style of game where it feels like it could be a close one, and then Alabama just kicks their butt. So I'm going to roll with the Crimson Tide here.
I'm sorry. There's 3 different attempts to start a sentence. It's really interesting for me thinking about this game because we haven't done our Alabama preview yet, but about 50% of me expects Alabama to be very quiet in OTAs, as quiet as Alabama can be. And then all of a sudden, week 1, they come out like a machine like 2023 Washington was. They're scoring 45 points a game. Their defense is good, even better than 2023 Washington was, but not like elite. But it doesn't matter because their offense puts so much pressure on you that you're going to end up making mistakes on your offensive side, and it's going to be over before you know it. So part of me just expects that to happen just because it's Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb back together, and now they're just at a place where they can get Alabama players. Part of me has a personal rule, and I don't know what yours is, but I feel like you got to have a number eventually where it doesn't matter how good a team is, but you got to take the other side. I remember 3 years ago, Oregon was going to Colorado before Coach Prime got there. They were 31.5-point favorites. And they ended up covering, mind you. But at that point, one of my buddies was a Colorado alum, and I just looked at him and was like, I can't in good conscience take Oregon. And I guess 11.5 is not as bad, obviously not, Florida State, they bring in Thomas Castellanos to be their quarterback. Mike Norvell is an improve-it moment. They have Gus Malzahn's office as the OC. They brought in a good DC too. They have a lot to prove. So I'm going to, on today, June 1st, 2025, I'm going to take Florida State with the points. I think they have a ton to prove.
Hey. I like that.
It's just a lot of points for me. And I look at by August 3rd, if we start going over our official predictions or something, sure, I'll be like, yeah, I'm actually going to take the Crimson Tide. If the odds change, if we have better understandings on quarterbacks or how fall or summer ball's going. But for now, man, it's just so many points that I'm going to have to take Florida State at home and the 11.5 points.
It'll be a fun one. There'll be a clip of Ryan Williams camp that.
I think it's funny because your mic chose the beginning and the end of this podcast to crap out a little bit. So
is that a hint? Is it hinting at me?
No, I think it just knows things, and that's all right. But yeah, all right. That's our one game so far. We picked Kansas State, Iowa State. We agreed there. We disagreed on Alabama, Florida State, but we're gonna see how it goes. It's our one game. Jace, episode 8 kind of flew by, even though it was an hour and 31 minutes. Oh my goodness. We have been on for a while. This is going to be our longest podcast to date, but that's all right. That just means we're fun. We had fun, and mind you, we're not on linear TV. We don't have a hard out, so we can go as long as we need to. So, on that note, as always, follow us on socials. F4 Discussion. YouTube, subscribe, flagged for discussion. TikTok, flagged, the number 4, discussion. We're everywhere you get your podcasts. We've been loving to see the ratings that are coming in. 5-star ratings on Spotify. I think we're up to 6 or 7 on there. Twitter. We're going to try to keep coming up with fun stuff for you guys content-wise. We're a little bit more active on Twitter right now, which is fun. And eventually we'll get to designing the actual 50 subscriber giveaway, because I don't know if we're actually going to give away a toaster or not, but if we do, great. That's all I got. Jace, you got anything else?
No, but keep plugging the socials, keep interacting with us. It's fun for us. We've been enjoying the ride, and it makes it more fun when you guys join us too. So keep going strong on the socials for us.
And keep me honest about what I'm wearing on the show. Because I don't want to keep repeating the same thing every time. It's okay if I repeat every once in a while, but not like 3 times in 6 shows. On that note, he's Jace Hatfield. I'm Farbod Merkazi. It's been an hour and a half of Flag for Discussion. Peace.